Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. So I'm going to be talking about, all the way up there, obstacles and patterns to maximize flow in cloud operations. Now, I crossed out IT and put in cloud because I think we've seen in the last couple of years there's a big difference, and the difference is becoming wider all the time between IT and cloud. Right? I know as an administrator, when I think of IT now, I think of a very different group of people who keep the printers running and take care of back office applications and SAP and things like that. Whereas what we're doing with large-scale deployments in the cloud for applications and various types of services are very different. So I distinguish this a little bit. Normally I would ask, how many of you are dev? How many of you are ops? I imagine a lot of you are dev. But we're going to go through a little exercise instead. So I've just hired all of you. You now work for me. Congratulations. And we're going to build, in 4 weeks, a Formula One analytics site. Now, each of you in your head probably is thinking something about this, right? Some of you will be thinking Scala, or we're going to use Ruby, or we're going to use Java. Some of you will be thinking, what would the website look like? What would the interface look like? Some of you are thinking there's a lot of things that can go wrong with an application like this. Is it going to scale? Some of you will think things like, which cloud are we going to use? Are we going to get data center space? Are we going to use servers? What operating system are we going to use? The way that you answer a question like this will determine what you actually are. A lot of people think, well, I like to program, so I'm a programmer. I like to administer Unix systems, therefore I'm an administrator. But really, the difference between all of us really comes down to how we approach a given set of problems. The way that we view that problem and which part of it is the most passionate and emotionally engaging to each of us. So when we look at taking on organizations or solving a large task, we have to be concerned about flow. Flow. Company's made of lots of individuals. All those individuals need to work together to accomplish a task. And that means that there needs to be a flow. Now, when you think of flow, do you think of something like this? Water. It's being pushed via pressure, or it's being pulled down by gravity, and it flows along, and it comes up upon obstacles, it goes around rocks, it goes into certain pools, swirls around a little bit, keeps moving. It's very fluid. Or do you think this? Is that flow? Right? Some people, this is what they think about when they think about flow. That immediately tends to shut you down, right? When you think about water flowing, it's very peaceful, it's very comforting. When you think about something like that, you're thinking no, right? You're thinking I should go to LinkedIn and work on my resume a little bit. So this is the flow of DevOps, as I see it anyway. We have business people over to the left. These are our founders, our CTOs, people who come up with ideas. They produce requirements. I have a vision, I have an idea, I have something I want to do. They engage with developers who produce software. That software is then typically fed into an operations organization. They go ahead and do what I call they weaponize it. They make it available to customers. Customers consume it. Customers have feedback. They bring that back to the business, and we go round and round and round this cycle. This is the flow we're talking about in DevOps. Now, a couple ideas I want to bring to your attention when you look at this. First, if you've studied business, you know that the way that we manage a good and the way that we manage a service is entirely different. They are completely different. There are lots of great methods out there for managing the production of a good. And there are a lot of good business techniques out there for how to manage a services business. And they're not the same. They're not compatible. You can draw a lot of conclusions from one and apply it to the other, but they don't map one to one. Developers are producing an asset, right? At some point, you can theoretically get your program perfect. And it's out there and it's perfect, right? In your operations organization, you're operating as a service. There's no point at which you've completed the task, right? Until the business goes out under or something like that, right? One has a time element, the other does not. So when you look at this, you have a natural opposition actually between dev and ops. One is producing an asset, the other is providing a service. That's your natural tension that a lot of people grapple with but don't quite understand. Another idea I want to introduce is systems thinking. Systems thinking, hopefully, is something you've heard about before. It's incredibly important. It's a number of different ideas in a school of academic thought around how we manage systems. A couple important principles about a system. A system cannot be divided into independent parts. And one of the key things here in any given system is that the essential properties of the system itself are that which none of the individual components have. And so if you take a system and you divide it into its constituent parts, you lose the emergent properties of that system, right? That's why you take a company and you chop it into bits and it falls apart, right? The emergent behavior that you get out of a company doesn't come from any one individual or any individual group. It's the interaction between all of those teams working together to produce an outcome, not just the sum of it. So you can see this is a system. There's an interaction between each of these components, and that interaction is what produces an outcome. In DevOps, I like to look at things in terms of three primary components: people, process, and tools. But what's important is it's about the collaboration of people. It's about the convergence of process, various processes coming together, not just existing, but coming together, and the creation and exploitation of tools. So you can see here again, we have people in each of these areas. There are people, they're interacting. We're looking at process that brings them together, converging process between all these different elements, and then creating and exploiting tools in order to facilitate that flow. Now, a lot of times when we think about this in the context of a business, we're too close to the problem. It's hard to conceptualize it and think about it. But all of us have a wonderful example. We like to talk about factories and things like this, but one of the best examples of flow, working or not working, that we've all experienced is a restaurant, right? The kitchen has to work with the wait staff has to work with the maitre d', reservations need to work. If anything is out of sync inside of a restaurant, you have a bad experience, right? And it's pretty immediate, right? You don't tend to say, I don't like that restaurant because I don't like the head chef, right? You don't like the food that came out of the kitchen that has a bunch of processes. There's a lot of intricacy that actually happens in restaurants that's pretty easy to see. We've all had good experiences, bad experiences, and that actually maps pretty closely to what we're dealing with in a lot of our organizations. We want to look at the holistic picture because, and you can say it with me, garbage in, garbage out, right? If we start out with something that's crap, we're going to end up with a crap result, right? And particularly for developers, everyone's probably worked at some point on some project that they thought was wrong when they started. They hated it to begin with. But it's a job and that's what they want, so okay, you produce it. In the end, customer hates it, company goes under. You're like, I told you, it's awful, right? You could have written the best implementation of it ever. It's beautiful code, right? I mean, everyone's probably got at least one or two programs out there that they've written. It was just a work of art. What it did was crap. But the way it was implemented was just gorgeous. So we want to look at the holistic system. So what does this journey look like? We want to establish flow. Flow involves the entire organization. We want to think about it systematically, so we need to start at the beginning and work all the way forward. So we're going to look at these in 11 patterns. First pattern is starting with why. Now this is so obvious, but people don't do it. Shockingly, people don't do it. The key to being good at anything is intentionality. If you read a book on how to have a better marriage, it's going to say you need to think about your partner, you need to think about what they need, you need to make time for them, you need to go and organize events, all this. It's going to tell you need to think about it, you need to be intentional. Read a book about how to take care of your dog, you need to think about your dog, you need to Be very intentional about your dog. You need to think about what they're feeding him and when you're walking him, right? Anything you ever read about how to improve it, it's always going to come down ultimately to intentionality. You need to be intentional about it. You need to set goals and values and understand what those goals and values are. And fundamentally, it means starting with why. A guy named Simon Sinek wrote a fantastic book called Starting With Why, and it really gets deep into this issue of really evaluating yourself and understanding what your core principles are, understanding who you are, what you are, before you figure out even what you're going to do. Second is, once you understand who you are, and you understand what you're all about, you need to build trusting relationships. Here's another thing that's obvious that people don't actually get intentional about. You need to build trusting relationships within your organizations. Simon Sinek, in his book, and he said in a couple of his talks, is that when we're with people who believe what we believe, trust emerges. Okay? Simple concept. If we're all on the same page, if we all have something in common that we believe, we trust each other. Trust is not just because somebody says they're going to do something and they do it. It's because we have some kind of bond with them around beliefs. That's why any of us walking around Aarhus, we see somebody with a GOTO badge and we trust them just a little bit more because they believe something that we believe. When we're in a foreign country like this, if you see somebody else who has an accent like yours, you trust them a little bit more. Even though when you go back to your country of origin, who cares? When you build trusting relationships with people, you need to have honest one-on-one discussions with them, and please get out of the office. When we have these meetings inside of offices around big tables, we have a tendency to say yes, and that's a great idea, and we want to get along with that. But for some reason, trust doesn't actually come out of that, right? It's just another meeting. You just want to get along as fast as you can and get out of it. Get out of the office, go to a pub, meet with key people, right? Key people in the organization that you should be working together with. You really want to have good, strong relationships with them. It's particularly important for the leaders, right? If the managers and the different leaders in the organization aren't getting along and don't have trusting relationships, everything's kind of screwed from the beginning. Now, I do want to know, I'm not saying that you need to be friends with everybody. You don't need to go out to a pub with somebody and say, you know, how many kids do you have and what do you like to eat and all. It doesn't matter. It's just that you understand that you're on the same page and that you're behind each other in the initial vision that we talked about in the previous pattern. And once you've got that, then you want to share the vision and align the culture. Spread your why. Why are we doing this? Why are we actually in business? What are we trying to achieve? Who are we trying to reach out to? Once we know what that is, you've got to share that information. There's a lot of companies, if you're not in the executive staff of a company, if you ever go to an executive staff meeting, it's almost always enlightening because they'll start talking about things that they're trying to accomplish that you start realizing, like, why doesn't anyone else in the organization know this? You're not communicating this down. What are we really about? Some companies are good at this, some are very bad. You want to make sure that everyone gets it. Whatever your company is about, that everyone gets it. You want to extend personal trust and respect throughout the entire organization, and you want to propagate a flow-based vision of what we're trying to do, and you always, 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 always be customer-focused. Think about your customers. If you're doing it for yourselves on the inside, it's going to be neat, it's going to be fun, you're going to go to business. Focus on the customer. Always. Ensure that every employee understands who your customer is and who you're trying to reach, right? I mean, this is what this is ultimately about, is providing value to the market, to a customer. Everyone in the company needs to know who the customer is, right? Don't let employees just figure it out for themselves. Share that information so that everyone is absolutely aligned. And, most importantly, once you've gone through this, if there are people who argue with you, people who don't get it, people who are fighting the vision, cut them. Get rid of them. And just do it now, because they will sabotage you later. And that's the part that's hard. We like to think that certain people who don't get it, well, eventually it'll work out. They're really good at this. They're really good at that. We can use their skills. Get rid of them now. All right, so now we've got kind of the basics down. We've got a company that's thinking together, working together. We understand our customer. We've shared that vision. Everyone's kind of on the same page. We got that. We're building trusting relationships. We're all fired up. We want to go and work. We're not singing Kumbaya, but we're doing cool things. Now we need to understand the systems inside the business that are going to make that happen. One of the best, most practical ways to do that is called value stream mapping. If you've heard about it before, you're probably thinking, that's an incredibly boring thing. Yeah, it is, but it's important. Making a to-do list is boring, but it's important. Fundamentally, in value stream mapping, we need to understand that as a business, we start with some resource. We add value to that resource through a variety of phases, and then we provide that to a customer. That's what a company does, right? If you're in the business of selling hot dogs, you buy buns and you buy hot dogs and you buy condiments, and a customer comes, you take those raw elements that you did not produce, you put them together as a service for the customer, and you hand it to them. That was your value add you provided to the customer. That's what you do. So we want to take all the different components of the flow throughout the business, and we want to visualize that so we can all understand, we can all grok what we're all about here. That's your system. And that's what you want to visualize in some way that everyone is on the same page with that. There are a number of things that you can do, outcomes that come from once you've done this, like adding cycle times. How long does it take for iterations to come through dev? You know, often if you're on Scrum and your time box of 2 weeks, it's got to be a 2-week tack time. And how long does that take to get through development, through deployment out? There are a number of things that once you have a value map, kind of immediately fall out is fairly obvious. Now, if you're new to value stream mapping and you want to get started with it, Wikipedia always is a decent place to start. There's a fantastic book called Learning to See. That is a fantastic read. One of those that definitely jogs your imagination as you read it is very good at giving you some ideas and helping you figure out how to start doing mapping. So we understand what we're about. We understand how the business is organized and how value is added throughout the business to provide value to customers. Now we want to get down and more granular. Standardize your work. People don't like this because they think it's boring and bureaucratic, but it is really, really important to document your process that you use at each stage in your value stream. Employees should never have to struggle to know what to do. In a lot of cases, we sort of just let everyone figure it out. Some people get it and some people don't. That's a shame. It should be very obvious what we're doing. And if you don't standardize your work, you'll almost never find the flaws in the process. You end up with these meetings where you say, well, how can we improve? How can we make things better? And you get 1,000 different ideas and they're all over the map, and ultimately you just can't do anything about it. When you standardize your work, you suddenly can spot flaws in that process fairly easily. Also, be careful to include execution times with standard work once you've produced standard work. Once you've got that, then we're going to manage the flow through the value stream. Conbond is one of the best ways of doing this. It's taking something that is kind of virtual and makes it physical. Some people are using, physical boards with Post-it notes. Some people are using Linkit. How many people actually are using Linkit? Anybody? Couple? So Linkit is a fantastic way to visualize this. Kanban is something that some people have some preconceived notions of what you can or can't do with it. Fundamentally, it's a board with a bunch of notes on it, right? So you can map this out exactly to your value stream, and you can watch this. You can do handoffs through departments. You can schedule tasks in an individual group. There's a lot of powerful things you can do with Kanban. Don't just use your ticket system. A lot of people try to do everything in Jira, right? And it becomes sort of a mess. And one of the problems with just doing things in tickets is it works for an individual group, but it doesn't work across organizational boundaries, right? A lot of your managers look at that, they don't have any idea what's going on, right? Almost nobody's got really good dashboards in Jira anyway. So using an external system like Conbond for visualizing your workflow is actually a really fantastic thing to do and helps get everyone on the same page. It's the sort of thing you can put up on a big screen somewhere in your office and everyone sort of knows what's going on throughout the business. A couple of things that we want to focus on as we're doing this. One is Muda. Muda is Japanese for waste. Literally, it means futility. One of the fundamental aspects of lean and the Toyota production system and the things that they've worked out in manufacturing is that we constantly want to be eliminating waste. And waste is defined as any activity or effort which is not adding value, right? So we have in our businesses, we take stuff, we add value to it, we push it along the stream, and we give it to customers, right? If we're not adding value to it, it's wasteful, right? There's a lot of things that if we don't use that definition, there are a lot of things that we can say, well, that's important, that's not important. Is it actually adding value? If it's not, get rid of it. Don't just do things to do them, right? Make sure that everything that you do, every time someone touches a product or puts in any effort, that it's always adding value. This is one of the things you deal with a lot in code too, right? Is you don't necessarily need to over-optimize something if you can simply say, we don't even need that loop. Like, what is it even doing? Just, wow, we got a 10x performance increase, right? There you go. Our businesses have a lot of these sorts of things that we don't even need to do. We just need to have the courage to say we don't need them and get rid of them. A lot of examples, excessive meetings are one of my favorites. Do we really need to have this meeting? No, get rid of it. One from an operational perspective is when you do hand off change to ops teams, please give them change logs and release notes. Because if you don't, we have to figure it out ourselves. And we may or may not actually get at what you wanted. So just give that to us. It makes it a whole lot faster. Also, excessively large changes, right? If you have too many changes going out at one time, you get these huge batch deployments or whatnot, makes it a whole lot harder. Get them smaller, faster iteration, a lot less waste. When you stamp out Muda, you want to be using Kaizen. Kaizen is a Japanese process for doing continuous improvement. Kaizen literally means change for the better. Focus here is not doing things just to do them again. This is to make sure that we're adding value and that we're constantly improving our process. This is done through what's called a PDCA cycle. Plan, do, check, act. We want to be using the scientific method. That's what PDCA is, essentially the scientific method mapped to industry. We plan out what we need to do, what we want to do, different ways that we can attack it. Then we experiment. We go and actually do it, see if it works. Once we've done it, we watch it, see if it's really doing what we wanted, if it really has the desired effect. And then finally, we act on that. We standardize it, we push it out across the organization, we expand it, and we do this all again. That's the process of continuous improvement called Kaizen. One of the important things about Kaizen, though, is it needs to be driven by the people actually doing the work. Having some group off somewhere else who goes and figures out a better way to do something and then hands it down as a document to the people actually doing it never works, ever. It's absolutely just, you're going to end up fighting. You've got ego problems. People don't understand different factors. You want Kaizen to be done actually by the people doing the work, right? All of us doing an individual task, we know how to make it better. We know where the warts are. We know how to make it more efficient. Those are the people who need to do it. Those are the people who need to be improving it. And it needs to focus on where you are and where you want to go, not what would be nice. Where are we now? Where do we want to go? And then we're going to figure out how we're going to get there. We don't want to go into it saying, okay, we need to be more scalable, so we're going to use Cassandra. Cassandra may not be the right solution, right? You need to figure out what is it that we actually want to achieve, and then we'll look at all the different solutions that could potentially get us there. 2 ways in Lean to do this. One is, like I said, is PDCA, plan, do, check, act. And they actually have a form called an A3, which is an ode to the sheet of paper that it's on, which is just a form that's broken up into a bunch of individual sections where you put in what is it that you're trying to achieve? How do you plan about going about it? What is the supporting data in order to get there? And all this. So you can see an example of that kind of form. The important thing about this is that if the idea cannot fit on a single sheet of paper, it's too big. It needs to fit on a single sheet of paper, right? You have to have done a lot of your legwork to figure out what you're going to do. And most of us in tech, we love to just let's just try it and see how it works, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, right? We can't actually see ourselves evolving because we're just kind of figuring it out as we go along. If you go into any manufacturing organization doing lean, as soon as you walk onto the plant floor, you'll see a board with a bunch of A3s. And everyone can look at the A3s and see all the things that are going on in different improvement projects. One caution about Kaizen when you're doing this improvement is that Peter Drucker famously said that efficiency is doing things right, effectiveness is doing the right things. If you improve a process that is fundamentally broken, that's not adding value, if you improve that process, you're making the company worse, right? Don't optimize things that are broken to begin with, right? Focus on effectiveness, not just efficiency. Ninth pattern is Jidoka. Jez, I think, talks a bit more about Jidoka in detail and how it can be used in a number of practical sort of ways. This is quality at the source. Jidoka in Japanese refers to autonomous automation. It's really a philosophy around sort of fault detection. That if some part of the process is broken, it should stop there. So like in a manufacturing plant, if you're tooling a given component or something, you'll have no-go test units right next to it. So you machine something down to a certain size and it needs to be so and so big. And so you actually just have a little tool there that you pull it out, slide it in. If it fits perfectly, then you know it's right. You don't have to wait until you get to QA at the end to find that out. You find out right there. And if it's broken, you fix it before it goes on to the next stage. Anytime that we do these things, as we go through these deployment pipelines, for instance, we want to make sure if anything's wrong, let's stop it there, fix it there before we pass it on. Some practical examples is that when you build tools, for heaven's sakes, please make them idempotent. What that means is any tool that can't be run twice, right? Tools absolutely need to be implemented in an idempotent way. Using test-driven development helps us a lot, right? Find the bug as you're developing it rather than waiting until sometime down the road. Things like automated security scanning and things like this, make sure that we're seeing this all the time. Clear error reporting. Anytime any of you spend time making errors and logs more clear and actionable, a system admin somewhere is loving you. So please, we love that. Japanese implement a system called Andon, if you're interested in how it gets implemented in factories. Pattern 10, Gemba, go and see. Literally, Gemba in Japanese means where the work happens. It's important to go out and see what people are doing. If you're a manager, go sit with your developers, different teams, QA people, whatever. Go and just sit with them, hang out, go to their meetings, spend some time with them, see what they're doing. In a manufacturing plant, you would have a manager who would just go and literally stand at one spot in a factory and just watch for like 2-3 hours and just see what's going on. They get a real sense for what's really happening, not just some report. I would encourage all of us to do this with your customers. Go spend time with your customers and don't just say, hey, send me a report on how you like the application or something like that. Spend time watching them use it, see how they interact with it. Get that experience yourself so that you can use that to make better decisions in your day-to-day work. And the final is kata. Practice and teach kata. So we want to have standardized ways of working, standardized ways of solving problems. We want to be using PDCA, which is a scientific method, for solving problems. We want to have certain ways of thinking about how we approach things, about this philosophy of going out and using Gemba, seeing what's actually going on out there. We want those to be deeply entrenched in our organizations. And in order to do that, we need to practice it. we need to use it, and we need to encourage other people to do it. Now, kata is, if you've ever done martial arts, when you see people practice, block, kick, whatever. You go through all these different motions and you practice them over and over and over and over again. Those are katas, those are forms. The reason you do that is so that when somebody comes up and tries to bash you on the head in the middle of the night, you just go through the motions, and it's automatic, it's subconscious, it gets built into your habit. In our companies, we want to be doing the same things. We want to be practicing again and again and again the way that we implement these sorts of things, and then we want to be making sure that other people in the organization are being taught those same methods. So at the end of the day, it's just subconscious. This is why if you go into a lot of, like Toyota, where a lot of these ideas were originally kind of coalesced, if you ask them how they do things, they don't even really know. It's just how they've always done it. It's just natural to them. It's because they've been practicing it, they've been watching other people have been taught. So to review, these are the 11 patterns. Like I said, the first 4 of these really are about understanding the organization. 5, 6, and 7 are really about what we can do once we have that foundation. Kaizen is what's constantly improving these cycles, making things better. 9, Jidoka, ensuring quality at the source all the time. And then 10 and 11 are really about how we manage, lead, understand our businesses, and are kind of situationally aware. Fundamentally, it's really important to know who you are for real and be honest about it. Be really, really brutally honest about it. Who are you as a company? What is your culture? What are you building? Who is it for? It's got to be practical. Otherwise, you're just lying to yourself and you're not going to go anywhere. You need to know where where you're actually at today, and you need to know where you want to be. And once you've got that, it makes it a whole lot easier to figure out what needs to happen. And whatever you do, do it with repeatable patterns. Otherwise, it's just random happenstance. How did we get from where we were in 2010 to where we are in 2013? I don't know. Good decision making? Luck? Who knows? It's got to be repeatable patterns so you can understand where you were, where you are, where you eventually want to go, and how you're actually getting through. Thank you.
What's up with all the Japanese references, which I guess actually resonates with me because in my own journey, I actually found that the use of words like Kaizen and Conbond actually impeded understanding. I'd love to know why you chose the original Japanese terms.
Because they sound way cooler. So most of these concepts come from lean. Lean is the term. Let me go back. A lot of these ideas came from Toyota. They built in the 1950s something called the Toyota Production System. When other people looked at the things that they had come up with, they wanted to use them. But nobody was going to walk around saying Toyota Production System at Ford, for instance, or any other car company. So they decided they needed a more generic sort of name, and they called it lean. You'll notice that lean as a philosophy has sort of invaded sort of every industry. And now you're seeing it invade our industry. It's been used extensively throughout healthcare and a number of other things. The things that you see that are here, they're common sense, right? They're really just common sense. And if they weren't common sense, you shouldn't believe them. Anything that's not common sense generally is just a lie. It's very clever, but it's not actually useful. What's unique is that they worked out so much of the system and how it all fits together and how we can apply these things and how they can reinforce each other in a very unique way. And very few industries, very few people have ever spent the time to really figure it out. So Toyota stumbled onto something really powerful, and you're seeing it spread throughout. I like using the Japanese words because it makes sure we don't get too far away from sort of the original intent. I also want to make sure that you can go to Wikipedia and find any of these things if you want to. Don't trust me. Go and explore for yourself. It's a fascinating journey. A word is a powerful thing. So there's certain words I could pick for certain things, but they may kind of, be too overly prescriptive.
Right. What are good tools and methods for presenting and sharing the vision for
departments, teams, sites, and offices?
Do it in person. That's the most important sort of thing. Is do this yourself. Do this in person. Make sure that you're actually building relationships and talking with people, one-on-one. Don't worry about building a really great slide deck or a great document or whatever. Make sure that you're getting it across, the passion, right? There's a lot of here's one of the practical sort of things. A lot of people come to a conference like this, you get all fired up, and you go back to your organization, and there are other people in the organization who will get the trickle down of your learnings here, and they don't actually understand why you're doing this. They just know that they're supposed to do it now. You want to make sure that you're taking the passion, the interest you have in things and sharing it directly with people in the organization, and that everyone gets on the same page, right? We've all had that executive who did some stupid offsite and came back and went, guess what we're all doing now? You're gonna love it, it's gonna be fantastic, right? They've got the passion, they're convinced, but they haven't convinced you. So you need to make sure that you're actually talking with people, giving people the opportunity to understand what this is really about. Because if you just say like, guess what, it's all system, and we're gonna standardize our work, and it's all going to be awesome because we're totally customer focused. Like, nobody's going to buy into that, right? You have to have it worked out for yourself, and you have to share that vision with other people and make sure that it propagates throughout the organization.
So we're here at GOTOCon, a community of developers. I'm going to appoint you as the ambassador to the development community on the behalf of all of IT operations people everywhere. What are 3 things that you would love every developer to know about ops people that they may not know already?
Okay. Number 1, we don't actually hate you. I know it seems like we hate you, but we don't actually. Not to your faces, definitely. Another is we actually do program for reals. We do. We actually do write programs. We do understand it. We just don't think it's all that important. Fundamentally, the difference between somebody who considers themselves a programmer and anybody else who writes programs is that we just know we need to accomplish some task 500 times, and that is best done using a program. We don't actually geek out over how we write it, which is why we love things like Perl, right? Like, Perl's still rocking hard. It's still awesome. Sorry. Yeah. I mean,
you're thinking out loud.
But believe it or not, there are system administrators out there who are like, dude, I'm going to write that in Clojure, right? So we do geek out over things like that too. And the biggest thing is just like, let's communicate. Always need to be communicating. We're really not opposing each other. We do want to work together. And too often there's a sense that it's just sort of code is sort of thrown over the fence, and you end up with administrators looking at developers saying, why the hell did you implement it like that, right? And then you have developers, you guys are standing on that side going, why the hell don't you just do what I told you to do? There's a reason I told you to do it that way. There's a reason I want to implement it that way. If you've ever had something implemented and you said, I need you to use PostgreSQL to do that, and all of a sudden it actually gets implemented using MySQL, like, what the hell is that about? So making sure that you're communicating between the organizations is really powerful, because we all want to get along.
I love this question. Lean in a factory has to be different from lean in the software development process, right? Where do you see the difference?
The biggest difference is what I talked about before, the difference between the production of goods and services. So lean is applied to software development itself. Just the software development organization maps pretty damn closely. It's different across an organization because of the fact that lean doesn't map to services. Toyota, when they developed this, they were trying to figure out how to build cars faster and better and not to overproduce. And so it was really built for that. When you look at like how you offer a service, lean doesn't map perfectly over to that, and it's a little more challenging. And you can use these as principles, as guiding principles, but if you go and get lean books on how to implement manufacturing and how to do total quality maintenance and things like this, like, they don't map one-to-one. So you have to take the principles and leave some of the actual implementation details aside.
I think there's actually a tremendous body of work that actually creates the isomorphic mapping between lean applied in a plant floor operations versus lean in a service, providing service. And if you're interested in that, come find one of us later.
a lot of us spend a lot of time thinking about how to apply different kinds of concepts out there to service, because there really is very little out there with regards to how things work in services organizations. It's still a body of work that's really been ongoing.
One other last question. Isn't it true that Kaizen actually came from the US during World War II, as the United States Army had to produce hardware fast?
Who asked that question? Put your hand up. You, sir, you know your business. You know your business. Yes, it is absolutely true. Yes. So all these things that came from Japan actually came from the United States. It all started with Frederick Winslow Taylor around the turn of the century, and his work that was built up by a number of people that ultimately got to a fellow named Deming. Deming is the real genius. He worked out a lot of different things. There was a number of programs throughout World War II that were used to help manufacturers in the United States produce bombers faster so that we could go and kill Hitler. Those sorts of things were very interesting to manufacturing during World War II, but then afterwards were all sort of abandoned. And in America, things after World War II, for us anyway, were very good. And so we just made tons and tons and tons of junk. And we made tons of it, but people kept buying it because the economy was good. When the economy was not so good, we were just making stuff that nobody bought and just fell apart. So the Japanese had sort of a very different situation. And they were trying to recover after being bombed into the ground after World War II. And so they were in a very rough spot. But anyway, long story, you'll get me going like I can talk for 6 hours.
The answer is yes.
But Deming, yes, and it came from Deming. So anyway, he went to Japan to try and teach them, because the United States was trying to help Japan following the war to get back on its feet with an industrial base. He taught them. They turned the methods into TPS that ultimately became lean, and then in the 1980s, the Japanese kicked our butts, and we had to learn what we taught them. So it's this beautiful irony. This is uniquely American, of course.
20 minutes. Thank you so much, and please rate the talks.